Okay, people. So a bit of a first today because I'm joined by Michael Hayden, who well, I'll let him explain himself, but you know what I mean, he's been in the film industry doing his thing on the programming front. So Michael, you've got big things coming this week. So, you know what I mean, film programming, you know what I mean? Like you're heading up the Irish Film Festival London. So just let the people know a little bit about your background.
Yeah, for sure. I have previously worked at the BFI. I was programming at the London Film Festival for
Mm.
years. Um, and after that, I moved to Dublin and worked programming the Irish Film Institute. Um, from there, I went on and worked at the Cork Film Festival, Cork International Film Festival. I currently teach on at the National Film and Television School as part of their uh, film studies programming curation MA course. And as you say, I'm here to talk about my role as head of programming at the Irish Film Festival London.
Yeah.
And
So,
go ahead.
you you it's fair to say you know a little bit about film, you know what I
Yeah, I hope
mean?
so.
Yeah, you've been doing your thing for a while, man. Like,
Yeah.
yo, so what because working at the BFI London Film Festival, that's a big move right there. So what made you leave that role to kind of head out into the unknown, as it were?
I was given an opportunity to work on, I mean, working at festivals is one thing and something I really enjoy, but having the opportunity to work in Ireland and at an institution like the Irish Film Institute was too good an opportunity to pass up at the time. It's
Mm, mm.
very, and I'm sure you can imagine working at festivals is very different than programming venues. So,
Definitely.
just challenging myself and wanting to do something different was a good opportunity at the time.
Yeah. So your background in festivals, right? What was that gap like from going from that to the actual Irish Institute?
Um, Surprisingly easy. I mean, I was anxious about it at the time, but
Mm,
actually, feeling there might be a different kind of mentality you'd have to adopt, and certainly practically, if you can imagine, if you're working for a festival, you might be working on one event all year,
yeah.
programming, just one big event, and that's certainly the case with the London Film Festival, and indeed with what I'm doing at the minute with the Irish Film Festival London. So, in a sense, you're doing that, working at a venue, you're putting together programs week to week, but at the same time, you adopt the same mentality. You want to put together the best programs available to you. You want to have the best films in place. You want to, do that from month to month as you might do from year to year with a festival. So it's
Mm,
so different. I didn't find it so different.
right. Right. And
You're still working to deadlines and dealing with,
yeah.
people who might have different opinions to you and all those things. So the politics are all the same,
Hmm.
um, but like I say, keeping the integrity of the program and doing the best, putting together the best program you believe you can is the similarities.
Yeah. It's kind of like imagine a quantity of scale and, you know, a higher number of you know, things that plates you're spinning.
Yeah, again, I mean, it's horses for courses. That it's different. I didn't, like I say, I was anxious moving into that space, thinking, oh, this is going to be different. This is going to be a challenge for me. And ultimately, I didn't find it that different. Like I say, I was still watching the films and judging them and trying to find a place for them in the program I was putting together at the time.
Mm,
What I,
yeah,
which what I do at a festival, which is what I do when programming a festival.
yeah, yeah. So, what kind of led you into festivals and programming just in general?
Going back a long way now, I left school not really knowing what I wanted to do. I left university and still didn't know what I wanted to do. I
Mm.
was in Manchester at the time, and there was a venue there called Corner House, which is quite a legendary independent venue. Again, this is going back a few years, and in the late 80s and early 90s, it was actually the biggest independent cinema in the UK, even though he only had 3 screens at the time. And I started working there, tearing tickets, and
Hmm.
that proved to me to be more of an education than school and university had. Really, I was getting to see, you know, so many films, learning about them, learning about the process, about how they got to the screen.
Yeah.
Um, and from there, was given the opportunity to program a festival uh, of American independent cinema at the time. And again, this is going back to the mid 90s by this time.
Mm.
And from there, I was, by that stage, I was, duty manager at the cinema. I was working front of house. I was tearing tickets. I was selling tickets. I was doing all that side of things, and that's set me on the course to want to carry on programming, just working for that festival at the time, putting that festival together at the time. And from there, I moved on to other venues, but ultimately ended up working at the BFI.
Mm. Okay.
So it wasn't a planned course.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm teaching a lot of students now who have that ambition and have the opportunity um, through the course at the NFTS to go into programming, and maybe in a more structured manner. But there didn't seem to be that opportunity. It was all about learning on the ground, if you like.
Yeah, but I think there's something to be said about that, right? Because, a bit like you, I started off, in the cinema, right? Working on that ground level, and then just moving up within. And I think it gives you that different insight into things,
Yeah,
right? Because you get to see, because you're having conversations as you're doing all of this stuff. So, you get that insight into why people are coming to the cinema, right? What was the thing that maybe led them to see this film over another film? Right, that just some of the restrictions, when it's a family, right, you might be like, oh, you come here often, they'll be like, oh, it's trouble getting babysitters, so every now and again we try once a month and we try and pick a big you know what I mean, something all the
yeah,
family. You get these insights into why people come, and then you see the other restrictions, right? I was putting together like trailer packets for each of the films, right? So you're doing that, then it's what films go in what screens, right? And the movement of those films throughout the day. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we should move it to this larger screen at night because it's popular, and we can tag it to the other screen. It's just all of these different things that you then get to see that you don't necessarily get to see if you're doing a course.
yeah, absolutely. I think you have to say as well. I mean, I'll hesitate to guess how old you are, Kevin, but we grew up in very different times, and certainly in the 80s and 90s when I started, taking an interest and taking film seriously, going to somewhere like Corner House was the only opportunity you got to see films by, say, the Coen brothers,
Yeah.
any foreign language work, um, a lot of American independent film, any repertory cinema at all. That was
Mm.
the only place you got to see it. Corner House had 3 screens at the time. There were maybe 12 in the centre of Manchester at that time. By the mid to late 90s, there were probably, people were going to see Quentin Tarantino films at the multiplex. They were going to see Coen Brothers. They were going to see all these David Lynch films, all these films that previously had been the preserve of a venue like a precious venue like Corner House.
Yes.
Now there must be 70 screens in the centre of Manchester quite easily.
Mm.
And, while there are still venues around trying to find their place in the world, and the work has, is so different. The work people get to see.
Yeah. I mean,
See it.
it's kind of it's an interesting one, right? Because as you say, there used to be these kind of just spaces only for independent, and you didn't see that in those independent films in somewhere like an Odeon.
No,
You know, there was a clear divide in what things showed, but there was a limited number of places to see films.
yeah,
And, you know, saying even now Manchester might have 70 screens, still not that many when you compare it to somewhere like New York, LA, and you know what I mean? Like how many that they have. But we even with this new number of screens, the programming is completely different.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always use the example, but when I mean, it's an obvious one, but when Reservoir Dogs came out, um, Cornhouse was showing that exclusively in Manchester, and the queues
Mm,
were out the door for weeks. You know, it broke records. People came and saw it at the time, and again, you know, if you remember that time, you will remember the phenomenon that was around that film.
yeah.
You know, 2 or 3 years later, and Pulp Fiction came out, and it's showing everywhere. It was showing everywhere.
Mm,
And again, Corner House done the job in creating an audience for Tarantino film, but it didn't necessarily get a reward in um, in having nurtured those audience for that films when those films went everywhere afterwards. And I don't know, you know, obviously those films need to be seen as widely as possible. Uh, you know, most films need to be seen as widely as possible, but so you can't be overly precious about it. But
mm,
like I say, that seemed to be a big tipping point at the time, or how you could recognise how things were changing. That,
yeah.
you know, Corner House wasn't the only place, or the local independent cinema wasn't the only place you'd go to see that work.
Mm, mm. That is interesting, right? Because that's something that I've kind of noticed. And it's one of the things that I kind of looked at because I remember writing my dissertation for university. That's I did a marketing BA, and like the actual dissertation, because you know it's you're always trying to look for a way to stand out, right? Because you want your work to be judged on its merits rather than the other 20 people writing about the same subject. So I wrote about like because this was when come out Spider-Man, right? So it was just whether a comic book film worked as a marketing tool for the comic book industry or vice versa, right? What led to an audience and a relationship with that audience. And I think it's one of those things that you look at and you kind of understand that people aren't necessarily beholden to a venue. You know what I mean? Like, just because one place is showing something doesn't mean that if that offering was somewhere else, people would stick to that original place. And I think what you see is a lot of places weren't nurturing the relationship. It was just like, we're the only people showing this thing, so obviously you're gonna come here.
Mm.
But that was it. So when the landscape changes, people move because there's not a necessarily that solid bond, you know, that solid relationship. And I think that's something we're definitely seeing at the moment, you know?
Yeah, you know, I think there are some great independent cinemas throughout the country that people will show loyalty to. Um, but I think going back to that period, I mean, just going back to referencing that period and how things have changed since, I think the amount of films that are out there now, and this is before we even mention streaming services and get
Mm,
to it's just the experience of going to the cinema. I think some cinemas and some cinemas who present themselves as you know what we would once call art house or independent cinemas. Some people who will show interesting work feel they might have to show a big franchise film as well now in that
Yeah.
context. And I have no huge issue with that, but I think the context has to be different. If you're showing Star Wars and James Bond to um, make a quick buck, I think that's I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. Or if that means you can show repertory cinema and foreign language cinema as well, I think that's the business model you're kind of looking at. But I think presenting that work in a different context feels important, and that might be the menu you have in the bar, or the points you serve, but more from a curatorial point of view, it feels like you could do more. You could have introductions, you could have filmmakers talk about the work, you could do all those things, and multiplexes won't do that,
No.
but proper curators and programmers will find a way of, making reference to that work throughout their program.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because it's kind of touching on what we'll be going into, right? And it is, as I say, it's creating that relationship, right? It's creating a story,
Yeah,
because films are stories, right? It's all about storytelling. And I think sometimes that's forgotten in the programming, right? In the offering of the venue itself. And I think by creating those intrinsic kind of value points, that's what keeps people coming back, because it's just like, oh, I get to see the entire career of this filmmaker, right? And there's all these talks that go into it, and that's intriguing,
yeah,
right? Who wouldn't want to find out what was going through, yeah, let's say Linklater's mind when he'd made Dazed and Confused,
yeah,
and what led him to make the next film, and then how does he go from that to the Before trilogy, and you know what I mean, Tarantino, what did he find in making a Reservoir Dogs? And at the time, right, those restrictions on what you can say and the level of violence to now,
yeah,
right? So those are the things that I think a lot of people find very compelling,
yeah.
and a great film programmer can build that story.
Well, Linklater's an interesting case in point because he's at a time of his career now when he's got two films playing festivals this year.
Mm,
He's finished two films in a singular year, and we all know how prolific he is and the variety and diversity of work he's produced in the past. Where would be the space for uh, a film programmer now to do a Richard Linklater retrospective? Where would that happen? And I'm not sure there's many spaces, certainly not in cinemas, where somebody who could do a complete Richard Linklater retrospective. Although I think you're absolutely right, is that it's that would be a fascinating thing for people who come and see Nouvelle Vague or people who come and see Blue Moon. Where did that filmmaker come from who's produced these two quite brilliant films this year?
mm.
Um, and it would be a nice point to do it, but I don't see necessarily where the space would be to do it in a
Yeah.
cinema.
Well, yeah, I mean, it brings up all of these different other
Yeah,
constraints
sure.
and issues and
Yeah.
everything like that, which, yeah, must be, very complexing when you are trying to program.
But it's a joy as well. If you think about it, it's a pleasure to have those ideas and watch films that trigger ideas. You know,
Mm,
one of Linklater's films is Nouvelle Vague. It's about the making of Jean-Luc Godard's A Bout de Sous, and again, seeing that, having the opportunity to see that film, but maybe program the Godard film next to it would be an obvious thing for me to do if I was working in a venue now that I could do that. But and I'd love to do that, or
But it's working in a venue that allows you to do that.
exactly that.
Oh man, it's such an interesting, I think, topic.
Yeah.
Looking at that kind of stuff, because all the different constraints, because it's finding films that might go together, but then there's all these other things that you have to think about when trying to program that.
Yeah.
But you have all of this stuff, all of these things that you're doing. So what led to the Irish Film Festival London?
Well, the Irish Film Festival London has been running since 2011 now. It's set up by Kelly O'Connor, and who works at the embassy now. And she ran it for a number of years. And I was asked to take over it just 3 years ago. This is my third year now. I was asked to program the festival. And that was after, obviously, the experience I've had programming generally, but also the experience I've had in Ireland. As I mentioned, the Irish Film Institute and Cork were big parts of my life for a number of years. And my family's Irish. I have connections with the country, although I have a Brummie accent. The whole, the whole. We won't get into the discussion about identity, but I have my passport, and it's green, and I know what side of the fence I stand on. But yeah, so I was asked to take on the program. I have 3 years programming the festival now, and it's been good. The programs have been strong. The response from the audiences has been good. The filmmakers really value it. I think one of the things I try to do when programming the festival is, obviously the UK and Ireland have had, shall we? I mean,
it's a bit of an on-again relationship, maybe.
Well, culturally and historically, I think there's been differences, but when you consider, and that's not to downplay anything, of course, but when you think about how close the countries are together and how much they do have in common, it's still kind of baffling to me about how much work gets produced in Ireland that doesn't get seen in the UK, that doesn't get celebrated over here. And obviously you can point to the success of things like Kneecap or The Quiet Girl. And these are films not in the English language, but they were hugely celebrated over here. And say, there are audiences for Irish work, and there is audiences for work, not in English language, and those films found them. And people like Cillian Murphy and Saoirse Ronan, their successes almost get celebrated like they are English, and they're obviously not. So there's all that going on to suggest that the state of Irish cinema is in fine fettle. And yes, there are all these filmmakers and all this work getting made over there that doesn't have the opportunities to get seen over here. And I've always felt it was kind of my job and the festival's job to give those filmmakers and that work a platform. To have that work that isn't necessarily going to get seen over here, and say, these are filmmakers and work that deserves to be celebrated and seen in the UK. So it's giving the audiences that opportunity to see it, but also the filmmakers and the films an opportunity to be seen.
Right. And that is important. Because I think a lot of people look at Ireland, as you say, and, there's some big actors, right? There's these big Irish language films that have broken through, but also you consider a lot of things do get made in Ireland, right? TV shows use Ireland as a backdrop for, you know, a lot of different things and fantasy settings like Game of Thrones and stuff like that. So there is this very, you know, unique place that Ireland has within the film industry. But as you say, there's still this gap and these barriers around Irish films getting to, you know, shine all around the world and in different places.
Well, I think, you know, you can point to something like Saipan this year, which we're showing in the festival. That will get a release in the UK in January. We've got a preview on Saturday.
Mm.
And that's obviously played Toronto, it played LFF. You know, there are these successes every year. You know, last year, small things like these opened the Berlin Film Festival. You know, there are international successes for Irish cinema constantly. You know, Paul Mescal is, you know, had 2 films playing at
Yeah.
Cannes. You know, all you know, festivals around the world do celebrate Irish talent to a degree. But yes, there's so much other work that falls through the cracks. And, you know, certainly with UK audiences, I think when we're as close as we are, when we have a historical relationship such as it is, there is that fascination I find with audiences coming to the festival with Irish work and wanting to know what's going on over there, whether they're expats or whether they're curious about Irish culture, they want to come and see that work. So, yeah.
Yeah. So when you took over the programming role, were there clear things that you could see that you wanted to put in place, let's say? And how has that been over these 3 years?
Trying to define the program each year has been ultimately defined by the work itself. You want to find stuff that excites you, and you know, stuff you can hang the program around. I, you know, I I've been thinking about this year, and you know, the things that define the program this year. You know, certainly music is a theme that runs through the program, and that's always something associated with Ireland and the identity, but not in a particularly corny way. Got the opening night film is Lance Staley's Trad. Lance previously made Black 47 and Kisses, which are 2 of the most celebrated Irish films of the last 20 years. And he's an incredible director, I feel. He's made this very personal film about a young female musician from a very traditional Irish family who's she's a teenager and is getting disillusioned with the way she's making music, so kind of separates from her family to find herself.
Right.
That sounds, on the surface, I think that sounds a bit, you know, corny, but he's such a good director that all those suggestions of coming of age dramas and the road movie it turns into, he avoids all those cliches to make this really, really joyous film about music and youth. And it just feels like a perfect film to open the festival with.
Nice.
At the same time, we've got a documentary called Celtic Utopia, which won an award at Locarno this year. And that focuses on a group of young Irish musicians who are using traditional Irish sounds and instruments to advance folk music in the country. So they're using, you know, their political their music is being informed by both their youth and their political sensibilities to make something new from these Irish traditions, while referring back to the history of the country and the history of the music, and being respectful of that. They're really creating something new, and the film's really exciting, I think.
Ooh, fascinating. I think that's the always it is the I think interesting thing about film, and it is these kind of things are the example of I mean, widening the scope, right? Because you, as you said, you get a film like with the first one that on paper might look like run of the mill tropes that we see all the time, but the beautiful thing is we haven't seen that film from that director, right? And it's different voices have a different spin on these things. So it's not just that typical thing that you see. You get to see someone's brand new interpretation of coming of age, of approaching these problems and finding a way through.
Yeah,
And that's the magic, right?
yeah,
And that is the reason why it's so important to see films from different parts of the world, from different directors, because you get these different takes that you don't always see.
mm. And I think it's particularly important from Ireland and that notion of romanticism and sentimentality and um, you know the history that we might come to, the relationships with the rest of the world. Because in
Mm,
other ways, Ireland, because of its history, has been quite isolationist, and yet now it's evolved into a big, significant European country. It has you know, influence greater than the size of the country itself. Um, so now, while it's expressing itself in art and in music and in film, I think that's a way of understanding the country as well. We talk a little bit about the history, and there's two films I'd like to mention in relation to that. Quite different films. Again, the first is a documentary, and it's a really significant film by a documentary filmmaker called Aoife Kelleher. And she's taken on the the scandal of the Magdalene laundries and the mother and baby home.
mm,
And what she tells the whole story of uh, what happens in there through survivors from the homes and and the laundries. And but what I think is incredible in the way she tells the story, and this is a stain on the Irish nation. This is something that defines the country. Is coming to define the country in a way the Troubles has in the past. I feel
yeah.
it's always going to be something that's there that needs to be talked about in relation to Ireland. And uh, what Aoife Keller does with the film, she celebrates the people who have campaigned to get them to a stage where they can have a discussion about reparations, or they can have a discussion about who's responsible for them.
Mm,
Rather than that story being swept into the carpet, there are there are heroes in the legal system and the survivors themselves who have not let this story wither away and die. And it's still out there for people to discuss and talk about, which has happened in other scandals in history in both our country and in Ireland. So she celebrates those things. So while the story itself is grim and grueling and as horrible as you might imagine, the hope and the positivity she brings to the film is remarkable in itself. And the film's called Testimony, and it's a really, really remarkable piece of work.
mm,
Now, the other thing over the last 23 years that has affected certainly sports fans in Ireland is the moment when Mick McCarthy and Roy Keane got together in Saipan before the 2002 World Cup and fell out, and
yeah.
Roy Keane walked out. Now, this moment is part of, I don't know, it's become part of the Irish psyche so much that even when Glenn Leyburn and Lisa Baradazar's film Saipan was announced, before they'd even shot a frame of the film. It was front page news in Ireland that it was being made. Every paper in Ireland carried a story about it. And the story itself, whatever happened between the two people, there's been so many autobiographies and stories about from people who were actually there in the room to talk about, to witness it, and they can't agree on what actually happened. But these two filmmakers, who I feel are two of the finest filmmakers working in Ireland today, they're previously responsible for Good Vibrations, which is a fantastic film, and Ordinary Love. They, to go into that and try and recreate what's happened, strikes me as incredibly courageous. Never mind that they do it with such wit and with such humour and such vibrancy. And it's like, you know, that film's going to get released in Ireland on the 1st of January, and everybody in the country will be queuing up to see it.
Yeah, that was, I mean, that moment was something you heard about, you know, all over the place.
Absolutely.
You know,
yeah,
it was a crazy one.
And although they're two very different films, I just think about looking back at the history of the country and looking back at what where we are now, certainly in terms of both, you know, political scandals and, you know, if you follow the Irish football team at all, it makes it even more depressing and harrowing watch to see a team that once contained players from who were playing in the Champions League at the time, you know, compared to what, you know, the people who turn out for Ireland now. It's a harrowing watch.
Yeah. I think another thing though that is very clear from, you know, film, and when you look at something like Testimony, it's dealing with this horrendous subject, right? And what its impact was in Ireland, but it doesn't really matter where in the world you're from, because there's this similar thing happening all over the world, right? I just recently spoke to 3 women that co-directed this series. It's airing in Canada at the moment. It translates to Beautiful Girl, and it was about the Inuit community. And in the conversation we had, we touched upon a similar thing that happened to the Inuit people, right? During lockdown, I remember there was this vote happening in Australia with the, oh gosh, it was like South Islander, and like the terms keep on changing. I forget what the like Aboriginal community, but I know the wording has changed. But a similar thing happened with them, right? You had the situation in Scotland with the children's homes there, where they shipped the kids off to Australia, right? There's these things that happen all around the world, right? We think at times we're so different from this country and those people and blah, blah, blah. But there are these threads that connect us on these different levels, whether it be, you know, scandals and tragedy, but, you know, that we can all speak to. And I think it's films and documentaries like Testimony that remind people how connected we are, right? That we are very similar, and you can relate to something even though it's happening in a different part of the world.
For sure. And, you know, I've watched enough documentaries about Pinochet or, you know, what's happened in history around the world to, you know, have a bit of an understanding and a grasp of what went on there. But I think these political scandals, you're right, they happen and they keep happening. You can think about, even the last few months in this country, agonising over the post office scandal or
Mm,
Windrush or so many other things, so many other outrages that keep happening. Or PPR. What happened in Ireland at that political particular time in history, though, and we we shouldn't forget that the Magdalen laundries only closed in 1996. That's
mm,
most of our life. That last one closed in 1996. That's within recent. Um, the collusion between the state and the Catholic Church to keep those institutions open and to keep, women enslaved in them does seem beyond shocking,
yeah.
beyond shocking, you know, and it's, the fact that there's filmmakers like Eva Keller and her collaborators out there to keep that conversation going, and to celebrate those people who are still fighting for justice, uh, feels really significant to me.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Because I imagine so many closed doors in trying to have those conversations,
Mhm.
and, other things that I'm sure went on trying to stop them from making that film. So the fact that they kept to their guns and they, you know, did it,
Yeah.
very courageous, as you said,
No, it's taken them years, Kevin. It's taken them years.
Mm, mm. So yeah, I mean, so many interesting things happening at the festival, and like, I know your closing film is The Swallow, right?
Yeah. The Swallow is from a filmmaker called Tygo Sullivan, who has a reputation as a film essayist and documentarian. Um, he's, and he's been celebrated in that way. His first fiction feature is The Swallow, which stars Brenda Fricker. And it's this meditation on memory and loss as this old woman, played by Brenda Fricker, rattles around this um, shack she lives in on the coast in County Clare. It's it's a really gorgeous, beautiful film, and it just reminds you what an extraordinary actor Brenda Fricker is.
Mm,
She was the first first Irish actor to win an Oscar, and I think we should celebrate her for that. And the festival intends to do that.
yeah, it's really interesting piece of work. That I think, I don't know, like, if someone kind of told you what it was, you might go, "What?" But in just watching it, it's so compelling, right? He's taken such an interesting approach to bringing this to life that, oh man, it just resonates so much, and you finish it, and it's one of these things that just stays within you. You know what I mean? And you're just like going, oh man, and it makes you think about, say the people that, you had, there has been a gap in conversation with them, and moments in time, and just all of these things that you start to ruminate on. And I think a film and a story that can do that is so phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
was, he's so talented, I think, Ty. But like I say, the collaboration with him and Brenda Fricker seems perfect to me.
Mm, indeed, man. Indeed. Now, you have all of these interesting things showing at the festival. Um, what there's an issue I have with festivals, and sometimes going to the cinema in general, is like an access situation, because I'm kind of registered blind, right? So I can't see subtitles, and audio description, and just all of these things aren't, it's not something that you get every time you go, and it's not always talked about in the description of a film. The amount of times I've gone to a film and then suddenly subtitles show up, and you're just like, wait, no one said this was a subtitled film. Like, what is happening? And I've spoken to people, and they're like, oh, probably just 5 minutes of subtitling, and then it's half the film is subtitled.
Yeah.
It's like, what's happening? So, how does your festival? How did they approach this? Do you have an
Um,
insight on that?
well, we want to have films to be accessible to everybody, of course. We work with View. We'll be showing the films at View Piccadilly, and the opening night trad will be at View West End, Leicester Square.
Nice.
Um, we'll work with them to present the films in the best way possible. In terms of subtitling, we can't get away from the fact that um, some of the films are in the Irish language. We're
Mm,
showing one film that's entirely in the Irish language, which is Antos, which is this great jigsaw puzzle of a thriller uh, from the north of Ireland. Um, really, a film I'm really excited about presenting this week. And elements of trad and Celtic Utopia are in the Irish language as well. So I think it's right that we subtitled to for for people that don't have Gaelic.
Oh, definitely.
But I'm not sure. I think what would you like to see happening with subtitled films? Is
Whew. Well, Michael, I mean, I could go on for ages on this, but I think subtitling in general, I think there should just be a uniformity around it. There's a big issue that you do find is that you have this white text with no solid background behind it. So it oftentimes gets lost in the background of the film,
Yeah,
when it gets the light sky or people wearing white or light colored clothing, the white text just disappears. Yeah, I think size of subtitling could be looked at, but then it's the development of technology where, say, I could go in with an app and it syncs up with the film. And so I just put my headphones on and I can watch this film, but get it dubbed
yeah,
in my ear. So, because it's not about stopping subtitling, right? Because that would just be horrible for international films, right? Like, so you want films to be able to have the biggest audience that they can have, but
sure.
it's then just putting things in place that can expand that reach, and I think sometimes it's policy, as I say, around the look of subtitling. um it's like, when a film ends, and oftentimes it ends on a kind of a cliffhanger, and then you get all this text go explaining where the characters went from here,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's kind of like, put that text on the website of the film, so someone can go, oh, that's what it said, right? And you can find out what that was all about, and just things like that. So, you know and then it's just put it in the listing of a film, better
yeah,
indication of if it has subtitling
yeah.
and how much subtitling and that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, on our website, we will list the films that are subtitled. It will be part of the credits to the film. It will mention that they are subtitled, so audiences should be prepared. But
Mm,
like I say, it's intermittent in trad and Celtic Utopia. It's the entire of Antas is in Gaelic. So,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, when it's intermittent, you can work out a lot of the times what's gone on, through
yeah,
the actions of the actor and the body language and all of that. You know what I mean? So you can still appreciate a film. I remember watching oh my god, name's just gone out of my head. The vampire film, the Dracula one. Huh, came out last year. Oh my god. I'll remember it. But I didn't realize that was subtitled. And
right.
So I went in and watched it. Now I didn't really get anything that was said.
Oh wow.
The film itself was so compelling and interesting from a visual standpoint that I still enjoyed the experience, but I
Right.
need to watch it again to kind of be able to figure out what actually was said, you know what I mean? But it is you know, again, it's one of those kind of things that doesn't necessarily always get talked about,
No,
but
absolutely valid. I think, we should talk about these things more, and we should do more.
mm,
Um,
but
really
as I said, it's
bring as
like,
many people to the cinema as possible.
yeah, but being able to show these films, and especially in the given language, you know, because I think that's very important. So it is good that you are showing films in Gaelic and giving a space for these films to shine.
And I think after the success of Quiet Girl and Kneecap, I think more and more films are being made in the Irish language, and we certainly had a sense of um, the short films that were submitted from the festival for the festival this year. Uh, that there's more and more short stuff being made. We're showing two programs of short films at the ICA,
Oh,
one on
nice.
Thursday and one on Sunday. So again, that's part of that remit to encourage young Irish talent. Um, Claire Francis Byrne, who directed a film we're showing in the festival called Ready or Not, had made a feature film we're showing. His previous short filmmaker. She's won the Best Short award at the Irish Film Festival London twice in the past.
Mm,
And now we've got the opportunity to show her debut feature,
nice.
uh, which is shown on Friday, which we're really excited about. It's a, a story of a group of friends over the course of one summer while they're still at school in Ireland in the late 90s, discovering sex and awkwardness around that, really.
Mm. Ah, I think that's always special when someone has kind of grown up within a festival, right?
Yeah,
Where it's shown their short films and then they get to debut their first feature film within that same festival. There is something really nice and special about that.
yeah, it feels part of the job and part of your responsibility. I mean, I won't say we had any great role in nurturing, what Claire's done, but at the same time, it feels special that she's coming back to the festival after winning an award only 2 years ago
Mm.
for a short. Now she's made her first feature, and it's really great to welcome her back in that capacity.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So you're showing films at the View and the ICA.
Yeah,
Any other venues?
no, no, not this year. We have used Irish cultural centres in the past, but we don't have the opportunity to do that this year.
Okay, but still great venues
Yeah,
you know, see films in.
we're really happy to have a presence in the West End. I think maybe in the new year we might. Um, we've worked with the Kiln in Kilburn a few times in the past, and obviously there's a keen Irish community there, and we'd like to do more with them. We'd like to do more stuff with that throughout the UK. Uh,
Mm,
while this is the Irish Film Festival London, the organisation that organises is Irish Film and TV UK, and I do think we have an initiative and a ambition to do more screenings outside of London, and we have done stuff in Birmingham and Glasgow over the past couple of years. So yeah, we'd like to do more of that.
okay, so a festival like festival roadshow and take it
Yeah,
to
and
places.
again, just trying to get that work to more of an audience.
Mm,
Uh, um, uh, yeah, we'll see what we can come up with for next year.
yeah.
But certainly doing stuff around St. Bridget's and St. Patrick's Day in the new year is something we kind of up to.
Okay. Any like thought of building relationships with like schools, universities, so you can?
Absolutely, we'd be open to that. Certainly in areas like Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow, Liverpool. There's lots of uh, Irish community work going on there. Um, yeah.
Mm. No, that would be great. That would be great. Now, I think a big thing, um, there's so many festivals happening, right? So people have a limited amount of, funds which they can spend on, different experiences and stuff like that. So what would you say is like the big USP of the Irish Film Festival London?
Um, I'm. Yeah. I mean, it is just the work. It is what the work and where it comes from. We talked a little bit about Testimony. That feels like a film that couldn't have come from anywhere else in the world.
Mm.
We're showing a film called Girls and Boys by a maker for Donica Gilmore, and that is a mainstream trans story about two characters who meet and roam around Dublin over the course of one night and make a connection. And to think that a country that, like I say, in the past has been dominated by the influence of the Catholic Church, that has been relatively conservative despite what's happened over the last 20 or 30 years, for it to get to the stage where it's producing a mainstream story with a trans character feels like a big progress.
Mm.
So those are the kind of stories we want to highlight, the kind of uh, work that suggests the country is changing. There's another really remarkable documentary about this incredible character, herself the victim, herself a survivor of abuse from state and uh, uh, Catholic Church sponsored, supported care and abuse, called Amanda Cullett. And she's just this incredible character. She's an artist. She shows, her brilliant, vibrant work, and the camera follows her really intimately as she reveals her story of growing up and how creativity becomes this great release for her while dealing with the issues she had in the past. So we're showing all this new work, all these new important filmmakers. At the same time, we make reference to the past and the history, as well as to what's going on in the country right now. And we do have one. The other film I wanted to mention is Korea, which is a film which is our rep offering this year, our archive offering this year. It's a new print of a film created by Screen Island and the Irish Film Institute by Cathal Black is the director. And it's Andrew Scott's first film role. It's an adaptation of a story by John McGahern, who's a celebrated Irish author. He wrote That They May Face the Rising Sun, that was turned into a film a couple of years ago, and that film itself is brilliant. But Korea was made in 1995, and it's Andrew Scott's first role, and it's a really moving family story, period piece, uh, set just post, as the country emerges into a republic. And you see Andrew Scott on screen for the first time, and he's just magnetic from the start of his career. He's just really, really great in it. And I don't think enough people have seen that film, so it's really great to give it a cinema rating.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, it sounds like there's such a variety on show at the festival, which is fantastic.
Well, I hope so. We've got music, sport, art, politics,
Okay.
I don't know what else covered. So, so
I mean, that's a lot just in itself, Michael.
all the things that matter in life. Yeah.
Indeed. Oh man, people, if you are around London's West End, from the 12th to the, oh gosh,
16.
that's it, the 16th, then you want to make sure that you can get to see one of the incredible things showing at this year's Irish Film Festival London. Oh man, yeah. It seems like it is something people do not want to miss, Michael. So how can people watch and find out more?
Well, go to the website, Irish Film and TV UK. All the schedule and ticket sales are on there. Yeah, you can certainly turn up at the ICA and buy tickets on the door. I don't think that's the case at View. I think you will have to buy them online. But yeah, we'll be there. We'll be at View Piccadilly from Thursday till Sunday, and come and say hello. And we'll be at View West End on Wednesday night for the opening night film Trad.
Oh,
I should also say filmmakers are coming to all of the screenings. So we'll have filmmakers and Q&As there, and discussions about the films as well.
that's always a great thing with a festival, getting the opportunity to hear from the filmmaking team. That's always a very compelling part of the experience. So I'm glad that will be a feature at the festival.
Yeah.
Tremendous. All right, people. Well, all the links will be on the webpage for this episode. So, make sure that you, if you can, get down to the festival. Follow the festival online, because then you'll find out if, things might go on the road near you, and you'll be ready for next year as well. Michael, this has been fantastic. I think you're the first programmer we've had the opportunity to speak with, which is great, because it's always interesting to see these big festivals and everything, and you wonder what goes into it. So I'm glad you've been able to pull back the curtain a little bit and give people a glimpse into everything you do and the festival itself. So I appreciate the time, man.
It's a pleasure talking to you, Kevin. Thank you.
Awesome. And hopefully we can do this again maybe next year for next year's festival.
Yeah, hope so.
Awesome. Well, hey, enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope you have a tremendous festival as well, man.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.